We just only want Petronas, who is in Sarawak, to get the benefit of the state's natural resources, that is petroleum, to comply with state laws.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. We will comply with federal laws, which are, of course, need to be constitutionally enacted, but we want Petronas to comply with the state law. That's all.
Oil has long been described as a curse. Nations that possess it should be among the richest in the world, yet so rarely do those riches reach the right hand. Now, you might argue liberal democracies like Norway are protected at the outset from the worst outcomes of oil. Their representative governments ensure they will never become as corrupt, lawless, or authoritarian as others. Then came the real test. With the smell of money fresh in the air, in came the American giants, who had a reputation for contributing very little to the economies they drilled in. They would drop in, take the loot, and vanish, leaving hardly a trace. Some even forbid their workers from wearing non-American-made boots. While the Americans bullied the UK into giving its companies equal treatment under the law, in Norway, the government was firmly in charge. Oil, in its mind, was not just another product to tax, but belonged to the public, who could rent it to private companies in exchange for their help in extracting it. The conceptual starting point for taxation, therefore, was 100%, not 0. Today, oil is subject to the ordinary 22% corporate tax rate and a special tax of 56%, for a combined 78%. When oil prices collapsed in 1986, Norway fell into a recession. Something had to change. The solution, of course, was to diversify. In 1990, it created the Government Pension Fund Global, today the single largest sovereign wealth fund. It owns 1.5% of all public companies on the planet. All government oil revenue is invested in the portfolio, which helps reduce the country's dependence on oil prices. But what, you might ask, prevents a populist party from recklessly spending it all? Wouldn't voters reward politicians for distributing it today rather than prudently saving it for tomorrow?
By the 1960s, a nationalist voice in Scottish politics was gaining ground. The Scottish National Party, or the SNP, who won an important victory in Westminster in 1967. And in the years that followed, the nationalist cause received an unexpected boost: the discovery of oil off the coast of Scotland.
Liquid gold. Britain now has oil, billions and billions of barrels of it, and has been quietly lapping at the doorstep all the time.
In the 1980s, oil revenue exploded, and many thought Scotland should see more of this money, which added around £193 billion to the UK economy between 1975 and 2020. This was coupled with deindustrialisation in the 1980s, under British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. She was deeply disliked in Scotland, and this boosted calls for independence. In 1997, Scotland voted in favour of a devolved parliament, which was then created by Tony Blair, Britain's Prime Minister.
It's every single area of Scotland. We're all moving forward, and we're moving forward together.
This meant Scotland had its own parliament for the first time in nearly 300 years, and devolution gave Scotland the power to make decisions on areas like agriculture, education, and health.
In 1960, Venezuela was one of the 5 founding members of OPEC, and the only one outside the Middle East. When President Carlos Andrés Pérez nationalized the industry and founded state-owned oil giant PDVSA, Venezuela was pumping 3 million barrels per day. In 1999, a military officer, Hugo Chavez, became Venezuela's president and launched the Bolivarian Socialist Revolution. He benefited from a commodities boom that lasted until 2014. The president spent much of it on social projects to help the poor, but a lot was squandered. After an oil strike that ended in 2003, Mr. Chavez sacked 18,000 workers, many of them highly skilled. From then on, appointments at PDVSA were often political. After Mr. Chavez's death in 2013, Nicolas Maduro took office. Soon after, the oil price crashed. The economy went into tailspin and has never recovered. More than 5 million Venezuelans have left. Those who've stayed face shortages of food, fuel and medicine.
What is Dubai betting on once the oil runs out? Most of us are aware how some Gulf countries became rich and successful in just over a few decades after the discovery of their oil reserves. In 1966, oil was discovered in the country's Fateh oil field, but the then king Sheikh Rashid thought the quantity of oil was not enough, and looking at the present day, we can definitely say the king was right. Envisioning the threats that sole dependency on oil could lead to, the king took early efforts in investing the money generated from oil in building state-of-the-art infrastructure, which paved the way for a diversified economy. The Jebel Ali port in Dubai is the 9th largest container port in the world, and countries like China, India, the USA, and Saudi Arabia account for 32% of the total trade in Dubai. Owing to its strategic location in the Gulf, Dubai serves as a perfect trade corridor for the East, and currently, trade contributes to 28.4% of Dubai's GDP.